Hi, this video is looking at the EDUQAS Paper 1 reading exam, so we're going to look at all the questions. It's going to be based on extracts from normal people. I picked this because the extract is normally based on some kind of relationships. It could be romantic, it could be a family or friends. So Paper 1 exam then, it's a 1 hour 45, 1 hour for the reading, 45 for the short story, 2 hours 11 minutes if you have 25% extra time. This video is going to be based on people going for a grade 4 to 7, but I will give tips for 8 and 9 as well. So the reading exam then, it's 1 hour, it's 5 questions and an extract from the last century. However, it will be written pretty much in modern day English. You should be able to recognise most of the words. It's normally a page and a half, so this is actually the one from 2025, actually, June. Bit longer than it usually is, so maybe you'll get a longer one like this next time. And to get a grade 4 above, it's half marks basically, so half mark on all questions and overall. This question, this exam, only read from the lines stated, so don't read the whole thing at the start, just read the extract, then look at the questions afterwards, and you get 4 kinds of questions: bullet points, impressions, how and agree, which is evaluation. In the most recent exams, there's been 2 impressions questions, which is good news actually, because I think it's one of the easiest ones on the exam. So the first and the 5th question always stay where they are. So question 1 will always be list, question 5 will always be do you agree, and then the impressions and how questions can swap around. These are your rough timings, so 5 marks for the easy 5 mark, 5 minutes, question 2 8 minutes, and then 15 minutes for the 10 markers. So the most common mistake students make in the exam is they omit or leave out question 5. When I've got it in speech marks, it means the examiners have said it. And what they say is it's worth reminding candidates not to spend too long on the lower tariff questions at the expense of the higher tariff questions. So what they really mean is that the biggest mistake students make is they spend too long on question 1 and 2, and then they end up having to skip number 5 normally. So yeah, be tight with yourself, be strict with yourself on your timings. Okay, so good exam technique then. Draw a box around the line stated. So if it's lines 1 to 9, draw a box around it and do the rest for the remaining questions. That means you know your answer has to take place within that box. Leave a 1-line gap between each quote, which I'll talk about in a second. Start a new page for each question. And remember, put quotation marks around all your quotes. So this is what your exam should look like by the end. So it's really good because if you miss out a question or if you finish the exam a bit early, you can go back and add more quotes. You don't have to do that thing where you're drawing arrows from different pages. Having a 1-line gap between each of your quotes makes it really simple for the examiner to see them. And there's no such thing as finishing your English exam. So if you're reading, you got to add more quotes. And if you're writing, you can keep proofreading your spag to the end of the exam. Question 1 will always be list. So in this one, it's read lines 1 to 7. List 5 things about Sophia's laptop from this part of the source. So that's just example. So this is the listing question. It should take you 5 or 6 minutes. You need to use complete sentences and bullet points and use a different line for each point. And you need to start each of your bullet points with either character's name or pronoun. So in this case, Sophia or she. And like I said, the most common mistake is not taking an answer from outside. So it sounds obvious, but if I have a class of 10, I'll get at least 2 people who probably give me an answer from line 10. So yeah, good exam technique. So list 5 things about her laptop. So either start each of your bullet points with the laptop or Sophia's laptop. If you want to do it, I won't read this one through because it's a nice easy question, but if you want to pause the video and have a go yourself, then do. Okay, the laptop was silver, the laptop was dropped on a concrete floor, the laptop landed on its screen, the screen was shattered, the laptop still worked, and then the laptop contained crucial information about Sophia. So mainly explicit information. I've put 6 down, so if you get one wrong, you've got one backup. Obviously only bother putting 6 down if you're doing well for time. So again, I won't pause the video if you want to, but each of these bullet points I've started with either Connell or he, because that's who the question is about. Okay, I'll just show you this one from a past exam. So this is one where actually this student was actually pretty good, but because they didn't look at the lines, if you read here, they only get 1 out of 5, which is a waste. And they put only one valid, this is what the examiner wrote, only one valid point. The others are true, but not located in the specified line. So they've answered from outside the lines. Silly mistake. Try not to do it. If you can't find an answer on question 1, leave it. You can go back at the end. It's only worth 1 mark. There's no point time wasting 5 minutes for that. Question 2. So from now on in the exam, 2, 3, 4 and 5, you must use quotes to back up each point you make. And what the exam board say is focus on point and evidence, meaning if the quote is pretty obvious, you don't need to explain each of your quotes. So if it's a 10-mark question, look at the bigger extract, 2 from the start, 2 from the middle, 2 from the end. That's what they say. Okay, so the impressions question. So impressions means the opinion you have of a place or person based on the text. There'll be at least one impressions, although in the last few years there's always been 2, so watch out for that. It can be question 2, 3 or 4. It'll be worth 5 or 10. So a really obvious and simple example would be, what impression did you get of the girl when she's presenting her speech? If it said I was shaking like a leaf when I started to give my speech, well, what opinion would you have on the girl based on that? Well, you might think that she's nervous. So in a nutshell, that's what the exam is. Obviously, you won't be able to do simple quotes all the time. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it is. And my tip is look at verbs and adjectives that stand out. So if she said she stroked his back, we might think the person was caring. If it said she thumped his back, we might think she's aggressive. So look at the verbs and adjectives that jump out. And what do these verbs tell you about the character? So for this question, you're looking for 5 separate impressions with 5 separate quotes to back it up. A common mistake students do is they do 1 impression with 5 quotes about that. So I would do 5 separate impressions with 5 separate quotes, and the impression is normally going to be an adjective. So in this example, I've said the girl is hungry. That's my adjective. And then the quote to back it up is her stomach rumbled loudly when she looked into the fridge. Okay, if we look at an exam one now, what impressions do you get of Connell in this part of the extract? So say if the quote was everybody at school knew him and liked him, what impression would we get of Connell from that? Probably that he's very popular. So I put 1 impression I get of Connell is very popular. As it says in the text, everyone at school knew him and liked him. So you'd get a mark for that. Again, if it said his head was pounding, he hesitantly stood over the lager cans and stumbled to the sink, all of those quotes are probably giving me the impression that Connell was maybe hungover from drinking. So there you go. But I get the impression Connell is hungover from a night of drinking. I've got my green, which is my link to my question. Then I've got my impression about Connell, and then I've got the quotes to back it up. I always need the quotes to back it up, otherwise I won't get the mark. Really important point now. This is really going to boost your grades. If the quote is obvious or self-explanatory, there's no need to explain. So say if it was the same question and my quote was he was very handsome, I can literally just put 1 impression I have of Connell is that he was very handsome. I'd get a mark for that, just like I'd get a mark for the other ones. If it said Connell was furious at his mate, you can literally put 1 impression I have of Connell is that he was furious at his mate. So if you're doing 5 or 6 quotes, you're not going to be able to do it like this each time, but you could definitely probably do it half the time. Okay, so yeah, so if we go look at an extract now. So if you just want to look at the answers, scroll on. If not, we'll go through it. Connell is considered quite a catch these days. He revises every night for exams. He plays centre forward in football. He's good looking. He doesn't get into fights. Everybody likes him. Even Marianne's mother will say approvingly, that boy is unique. After Marianne told him she liked him, Connell started coming over to her house more often. He would arrive early to pick his mother up from work and hang around in the living room not saying much, or stand by the fireplace with his hands in his pockets, looking at the clock when he spoke to her. Marianne never asked why he came over. He started arriving earlier and earlier to see her. So we've got that one. Yeah, so we've got the easy one and the one we've already done. So pause the video. These are the quotes I would do. Pause the video and tell me what impression you get from these. And again, see if you can do one where at least maybe it's quite simple. Okay, I've put, firstly, I get the impression Connell was desirable, as it says he's considered quite a catch. I think his education is important to him, as he revises every night for exams. Another impression of Connell is that he's good looking, so that's my easy one. Then I'm going to zoom into the word unique, be that human dictionary, what does it mean? I said I think he's a special or rare type of person, as it says he's unique. I think he's interested romantically in Marianne, as he started to come over to her house more often and started arriving earlier and earlier to see her. And I've put, however, I think he seems nervous talking to Marianne, as he says he looks at the floor when he spoke to her. He doesn't want to make eye contact. So all of these, 1 or 2 sentences. I'm not giving my impression in writing 7 or 8 lines, short and sharp, and I would get 5 out of 5 for this. Okay, the how question. So this will be questions 3 and 4 normally. They will either be like this. How does the writer make these lines tense or dramatic? Or, in the last few years, they're more like this. What sort of man is Bob Hewlett? How does the writer show what sort of man he is? If you get this question, as in B, you'll be quite good actually, because really you're just going to answer it like the impressions question we just went over. So you could rephrase this to be, what impression do you get of Bob Hewlett? Okay, so these are 10-mark questions, so you spend 13 to 15 minutes. You're looking for 6 to 10 quotes with small comments on most of the quotes, and you're going to zoom in on keywords and explain their effect. So the big difference between if you're coming from school to EDUQAS, the main difference is with AQA, you want less quotes and lots of analysis, maybe 5 or 6 lines for each quote. The main thing to take from this video is with EDUQAS, our exam board, it's lots of quotes with either smaller explanations or maybe even some where you don't really need to explain. So this is what we don't want, where you got one quote of like 9 lines of explaining it. This is what we want, where you get each of these would get a mark. Nice, short and simple, move on to your next quote. Okay, these two people were just as good at GCSE English as each other, but just because the person on the right knew the exam wants quotes, they did much, much better. So this how question can be summed up by asking, why has the writer used certain words on purpose? Why has the writer chosen one word over all the hundreds of thousands of words in this dictionary? Why has the writer chosen a specific one? So if I said, how does the writer describe the fire with the quote, the flame was expanding, which is a nice simple example. Why is the writer chosen expanding over all the other words? What is the effect of it? What image is it trying to get into the reader's mind? Be that human dictionary or thesaurus. If the flame was expanding, pretty simply it means it's growing, it's increasing, it's getting bigger. So I've put the writer shows the fire becoming more serious with the phrase the flame was expanding. So that's my link to my quote and my quote. And then I've got this suggests, really simple. This suggests the fire is growing in size. 1 mark. The effect of that quote tells the reader that the flame is getting bigger. So if the quote was, how does the writer shows Connell's trip was difficult and dangerous, and the quote was, Connell shattered his leg, be that human dictionary again, be that human thesaurus. What does shattered means? Well, it means broken into small pieces or destroyed. So I've put, the writer shows Connell's trip was difficult, question, as he shattered his leg, quotes, this tells the reader his leg has been destroyed and broken into many small pieces. I've zoomed into that word shattered over all the thousands of words that could be used. That is what the reader wants to know, that it's destroyed. Okay, so that would get a mark. What students tend to do, grade 3 students do, is they write something like, this makes it sound dramatic to the reader. Okay, or this makes the trip sound very dangerous, where you're just repeating the quote. Neither of those zoom into the word shattered and tell me why the writer has used it. Or they might say something like, this tells me he's hurt his leg. Well, that is true, he's hurt his leg, but it might not get a mark because the examiner wants to know shattered. Shattered means it's completely gone, it's into small pieces, it's been destroyed. That is what's going to get you the mark. Zooming into the specific word and saying the effect. Don't just use a fragment of the quote, write enough to give context. 1 sentence is fine. So if we look at that same quote again, that would get a mark, but sometimes students, instead of putting he shattered his leg, they might just put shattered. So then the examiner's thinking, well, what's shattered? What are you talking about? It doesn't give enough context to the examiner. So feel free to write a sentence out. That will be absolutely fine. So the question is, Connell's really missing Marianne. How does the writer show this? And again, if the quote is obvious, you don't always need to explain it. So if the quote was, he missed her so much, the question is, Connell's really missing Marianne. How does the writer show this? If the quote was, he missed her so much, you can literally put, the writer shows Connell's really missing Marianne, as it says, he missed her so much. You're looking for 6 to 10 quotes. You won't be able to do it like this all the time, but you could probably do 3 or 4 of this where you're not explaining it if it's dead obvious. And my other tip is track through the text, try to go through the quotes in order and briefly talk about each one. The more quotes, the better. Almost think of it as a mark of quotes. Okay, so here's the extract. Okay, I've put a fake example there. So feel free to read it yourself and then I'll go through it. Those are the ones I would do. So maybe pause the video and think about why I paused them. The yellow one right at the start, he missed the way Marianne made him feel. He missed her company. That is an example of an easy quote where you can just go straight away. We're told he's missing her. As it says, he missed the way she made him feel. She missed her company. Okay, again, be that human dictionary thesaurus. If it was he was excruciatingly lonely, what words do you link to that? So alone, lonesome, isolated. Excruciatingly lonely means painful, torture. So if you put them together, you could say, the writer shows Connell's really missing out Marianne with the quote, he was excruciatingly lonely. This tells the reader he was feeling very alone since Marianne left him, and excruciatingly makes it sound like the separation is physically painful for him. Okay, other ones I've got are that one. I've got another quote that shows he's missing her as he missed the way Marianne made him feel he missed her company. That's an easy one. The writer shows Connell's really missing Marianne with the quote, he called her phone all the time. He sent a text message every day. Again, another easy one. You don't need to explain it. Just shove it in a sentence. The writer shows Connell's missing Marianne with he had recurring dreams about being with Marianne again. So I've zoomed into the word recurring. Why has the writer used it? This suggests he's thinking about her all the time. She's even on his mind when he's asleep. So if I'd write that again, I'd say recurring means it keeps happening. And then finally, I've put we get the impression he's unhappy to wake up to the reality of not being with Marianne. As he says, he wakes up feeling so depressed he couldn't move a single muscle in his body. So again, all of these will get a mark. None of them are more than two sentences. So go through it, track through the text, 6 to 10 quotes, comment on each one if you need to. Question 5, okay, will be the evaluation question. So you'll always get a hypothetical statement by a student and you say whether you agree. In this one, it's Connell is unhappy in his relationship with Rachel. To what extent do you agree? So the posh name for this is personal response and evaluation. And it's a 10-mark one, and treat it exactly like the how questions really, but you just need that little one where you agree. So 13 to 15 minutes, 6 to 10 quotes, small comments, zoom in on keywords. And what the examiner says is never completely disagree, use your judgment. They have changed this question EDUQAS a little bit, where 3 or 4 years ago you would always agree with the statement. Now I do think use your judgment. So if you do disagree, it's fine as long as you give quotes to back it up. If it was me, what I would do is I'd probably, unless I was really passionate one way or the other, I tried to find maybe 4 or 5 quotes that agree with the question, and then maybe 2 quotes that maybe show something different about the question. Okay, so Connell's unhappy with his relationship. To what extent do you agree? Again, do some little statement at the start. You don't need to give a quote for this one because you'll be quoting the rest of it. But yeah, I agree, or I agree to some extent. Okay, I'll read the text. He and Rachel started seeing each other in July. He regretted it straight away. Everyone in school had known she liked him. As to the actual relationship, it mostly took place before nights out, when she would put makeup on and complain about her friends, and Connell would sit around drinking cans. Sometimes he looked at his phone while she was talking, and she would say, "You're not even listening." He hated the way he acted around her because she was right. He really didn't listen, and when he did, he didn't like anything she actually said. He had thought that being with her would make him feel less lonely, but it only gave his loneliness a new tougher quality, impossible to kill. So I would say from that, it's very, you would agree, and it's fairly obvious that he wasn't happy. So 6 to 10 quotes and comment. In the real exam as well, this will probably be based on the whole extract, so you'll have a lot more quotes to find than just this paragraph. These are the ones I would do. So maybe pause the video here and have a look at these ones. Okay, so I agree Connell was unhappy. That's my little statement. And then I've gone into some quotes. So I've put, it says in the text he regretted it straight away. There you go. Example of an easy one. Don't bother explaining it. Then I've put one quote that shows he's unhappy as Rachel brought down his mood. This tells the reader being with her makes him feel depressed and unhappy. He shows he was unhappy with the phrase he didn't like anything she actually said. Again, another easy one. And then finally, he was unhappy by saying the relationship gave his loneliness a new tougher quality. So I'm going to explain this one. And I've said this suggests being with Rachel made him even more isolated than being on his own. So yeah, so he thought it would make him less lonely, but in fact it's made him more lonely with being with someone he doesn't want to be with. There's lots more on this text. Again, you could, another simple one could have been, you could talk about maybe he's always on his phone, so he's ignoring her. The relationship, it doesn't sound like Rachel and him have actually went out on dates. It almost took place just before they were going to meet their mates. Yeah, so again, 6 to 10 quotes on that one. So reading final tips. Time manage. When your time is up on a question, move on. Keep your eye on the clock throughout the exam. 5 marks, you need about 7 or 8 minutes. 10 marks, 15 minutes. Leave a 1-line gap between all your quotes. Do not talk about a quote for more than 2 or 3 lines on your page. If the quote is obvious or you run out of time, don't explain your quotes, and finish all questions. Okay, I hope that's been some of use to you.